A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I am glad you're with me on the program today. Hopefully you had a good weekend. I am feeling, I'm feeling so much better this morning. We had a cold front come through. It's felt like 104 degrees yesterday afternoon. It was like 65 this morning. It was absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to enjoy this while I can. Now, listen, we're going to be talking with Mike Sodini from Walk the Talk America here in just a minute or two. Mike had a guest post at Bearing Arms over the weekend that really kind of focused on. It wasn't necessarily a formal response to the Surgeon General's declaration of gun violence as a public health crisis, but in a way it was, because Mike was talking about what we can do to help reduce gun-involved injuries, gun-involved deaths among juveniles. And Walk the Talk America, we talk a lot about the mental health aspect for adults and for gun owners, but they actually have a program, Kids to Kings, that focuses exclusively on juveniles. And so I kind of want to touch on that with Mike today. We'll get to that conversation here in just one second. Before we do, though, let's talk about this. If we can, for just a moment, economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. With inflation on the rise and global uncertainty looming, it's clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. If you have not had your eye on gold, it's time to make it a priority. Priority Gold. Trust their team of proven professionals to help you diversify your savings with gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD or visit PriorityGold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree that physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings, no matter the economic climate. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market's golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist or visit PriorityGold.com/golden to learn more. That's 1-800-405-GOLD. And now, let's kick off our conversation with Mike Sodini from Walk the Talk America. Take a look and a listen. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for coming on the program, sir. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's good to see your face, man.
Well, it's good to see yours too. And listen, it was great to see your words. You emailed me last week and said, "Hey, you know anybody that might want to publish this?" I do, in fact, know somebody that would like to publish this piece that you had written on youth gun violence, right? And this is obviously a big topic right now with the Surgeon General coming out with his proclamation last week. We need to treat gun violence as a public health crisis. And this is really interesting. You and I were talking right before we hit the record button. You have an interesting take on what this means going forward. Obviously, Vivek Murthy called for Congress to pass a bunch of new gun laws. But do you think this is, you say this is about the money. This isn't necessarily about the legislation, right?
Yeah, I think it totally is about the money. And the reason being is over the past 6 years, I've been kind of invited behind the curtain of the mental health side and the research side, just because of the circles I run in. And it's easier for them to get government money if something is declared a public health crisis. So when the Surgeon General steps out there and says something to the effect of like, this is a public health crisis, I think most gun people literally just roll their eyes and they're like, oh, this is about them grabbing guns and everything like that. I see it a little bit differently. Yeah, there's definitely bad actors out there that are going to take this opportunity to kind of stand on the whole public health crisis ground and be like, see, this is the issue. We need to get rid of guns. But there's a lot of people that are just going to continue to get bigger grants, get government money to press their research. And we all know that the research, what more do we have to research? How much more data do we need? We know where, people act like there hasn't been research on firearms out there. And I'm not here to put down data. I'm really not. I always say, don't let data get in the way of saving a life. But we know where the majority of gun violence, comes from. Violence to self, right? That's almost 2/3 of it. Then you have underprivileged, underserved neighborhoods. It's how much more data do we need to start putting programs in place where we actually attack the root cause of the program? So I don't hit the panic button when the Surgeon General comes out. I kind of know exactly what the playbook is. And it's not necessarily let's go grab it. It's let's go get that money. And it's money that Walk the Talk America, like I've never been able to crack that code, but I'll tell you this. I was at a conference last week speaking, co-presenting with Mental Health America, and I was having some very honest conversations with people behind the scenes. And I gave that exact opinion to a table of people that work in mental health, and none of them argued with me. So I think my suspicion is right.
Yeah. But and I hope that you are able to crack that code and get some of that money, not for research, but again, for the programs, right? Because as you say, that's the other aspect of this. So you can have the academics in their ivory tower and we need money to do a study and to tell us, what we already know. Or maybe it's something we don't know, right? Because that's the thing. When you get this federal grant money, boy, you can come up with all kinds of stuff, right? We're going to research whether or not planting trees reduces gun violence. We're going to, whatever you can come up with. But then there's the program side of things. And that's, I think, where Walk the Talk America really does excel. And we've talked before about the mental health screenings, the conversation in your shirt, the intersection of guns and mental health. But I didn't realize that Walk the Talk America has a program that is, it sounds like, specifically targeting youth, kids, from kids to kings, right? That's the name of the program?
Yes. Yeah. It's ran by Devin Perkins, is a friend of mine, is somebody that I met years ago at the NRA show, and he interviewed me about Walk Talk America. And he actually came up to me, and Devin is a Black man, right? And he was just like, "Hey, any plans to do anything specifically for my community?" And at the time, I made a joke. I said no, because nobody needs another white hero. I said the Blind Side movies played out, and it's so funny because now cut to, everybody hates The Blind Side and they think that movie's trash, right? So, but anyways, I had said to him, "Hey, why don't you start something? And, I'd be happy to help you every step of the way." Well, he came back to me like a year later, and he had developed this program with a curriculum for his students out of Atlanta. And it was kind of a pilot program that we said, all right, let's give it a shot. Now it's a Walk to Talk America program, just because I think Devin is more comfortable running it through Walk to Talk America. And it just it covers every single base, right? Which is what I wanted to do with Walk to Talk America. I think a lot of people, when they think of youth firearm safety, just think of like the rural mountain kid, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a totally different demographic. And these are kids that come from underprivileged, underserved neighborhoods that have never had firearms introduced to them in a healthy manner. Devin saw that blind spot and said, like, if we don't address this issue, these kids are only going to learn about firearms from people that may not have been introduced to firearm responsibility. Maybe it's a music video or a hip hop song or something like that, where it kind of glorifies it in the wrong direction. And what he wants to do is stop that. So at least the kids understand that there's two ways to go about firearms ownership, right? And Kevin Dixie, who's one of the instructors of Kids to Kings, said, and I think it's one of the greatest lines of all time. He said, "The firearm could be a tool of oppression, or it could be a tool of empowerment. It depends on how you use it," right? So now these kids are getting exposed to firearms owners that understand responsibility, that own everything legally, that can be a mentor, right? Which I think is important. But on the flip side of that, now that we've come so far in society, kind of implementing things about mental health, right? Like, you'd agree with that. I mean, the firearms industry, we didn't talk about mental health until recently, right? Like, we're starting to kind of slowly turn that ship, but society as a whole didn't talk about mental health for a long time. And now you're kind of catching that wave. So what we can do with these kids is introduce them to firearms in a healthy manner, teach them about responsibility, and then also teach them about like complex trauma, PTSD, the things that they never think to ask about, but see that kind of shape their minds. And let's face it, kids all over the country, we all come from different places, but we all have different ways of life, right? Many of these kids, this is kind of like a sobering fact. The very first class that Devin had with these kids, He said, who here has access to a firearm, even if you shouldn't, right? Even if you shouldn't have access to it. All 16 of them like raised their hand, right? And many of them have the same like upbringing, background. Like, don't even get me started when they start telling the stories of what they had to deal with. It's just not good, right? So you have all these minds being shaped. And my thing is, let's go at it. Let's run right towards it. Let's empower them. Let's teach them about gun safety. I mean, I needed it as a kid. You know, I mean, I didn't come from those areas. I mean, everyone should have it.
And it's funny because when you talk about, you said, a lot of us think about, rural kids. I don't, honestly. Like when people talk about, youth firearm safety, my first thought now goes to Snapchat. It now turns to social media, and it's exactly what you described, right? There's a lot of kids who are getting an education about firearms, but they're not getting an education about firearms from responsible gun owners, from firearms instructors, from people like Kevin Dixie, right? They're learning it from their peers. They're learning it from celebrities. They're learning it from media. And we've destroyed, I think, that culture of responsible gun ownership in a lot of communities. And so to bring that back, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote about the New York State unofficial high school trap shooting championships, because this is a club sport in New York. It's not a recognized sport. But you had almost 2,000 teenagers with shotguns come to this, tiny little town in New York. Everybody had a great time. Everybody was safe. Everybody was responsible. Why can't we get back to that? Why can't that be the norm instead of this abstinence approach about, okay, we're going to teach kids, don't touch a gun, don't think about guns, don't ever own a gun, for God's sakes, right? Guns are bad, 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 bad. That message doesn't seem to be working. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it just doesn't seem to be resonating. So why don't we try something a little bit different? Why don't we say, okay, listen, every one of those kids can get access to a firearm. We've got teenagers who are in this country illegally in New York who can acquire a firearm much easier than somebody can legally. That's the reality, right? So this idea that, well, we just tell kids don't touch a gun, they won't. I don't think it's going to work. So what you're doing, again, it's based in the real world, right? This is the reality that we live in, whether you like guns, whether you hate guns. We live in a world with, a country anyway, with over 400 million of them. They're around. It behooves us all to raise a generation that is responsible, is respectful, that has a knowledge of firearms. And as Kevin said, the fact that it can be used as a tool of oppression, can be used as a tool of liberation, can be used as a tool just for fun, right? And I love that approach, because this, again, it's not just hiding out in an ivory tower somewhere. It's, okay, let's put this in practice. Let's do something about this.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to move forward. It's the best way to get people back involved in shooting sports. It's a whole demographic that we ignored in general for years, right? No one ever thought. I mean, if you look at women and minorities are the fastest growing segment of gun ownership, right? So it makes sense to even just bring programs in there that from a young age that they can say like, okay, I understand the mechanics of a firearm. I'll give you a personal story. I've been telling this story a lot recently. It's something I was always embarrassed about. But my first experience with a firearm was a negligent discharge. And my friend, his dad was an ATF agent, had a 9mm Beretta in the drawer upstairs. I remember he went to show it to me. And he took the magazine out and he pointed the gun at his father's bed. And he said, "Do you think this thing is still loaded?" And thank God I had the sense to say, "I don't know. Let's go out. Let's go into the backyard." Right. And we were little. I said, "Let's go in the backyard." And of course, I took the gun from him and I fired around into, because I didn't understand one in the chamber. I fired around in the grass. Thank God we didn't do it upstairs, right? Because there was no hiding that. But, point being is, as a child, if I would have at least understood one in the chamber, you know what I mean? Like, everybody should have that basic knowledge to understand that the firearm's probably still loaded, even if you think it's not. Like, just things like that, right? So I'm thinking about these kids. No one's ever given them a shot to teach them this. And what Devin does is so unique, too, because he doesn't just, because I know like the average anti-gun person would probably be like, oh, that's great. He brings guns into these kids' lives. No, he doesn't. He actually takes these kids out of their environment. He takes them on hikes. He takes them to a gun range. He takes them to places that they typically don't ever get to. And then he introduces all this knowledge to them. And they really do. It's like they need that role model, you know. He provides that, and it's something that most kids don't ever have. And I mean, this isn't another corny, like, anecdotal story that I'm going to tell, but one of the reasons why I didn't smoke as a kid was because somebody that I looked up to, when I thought I was being cool, and I started smoking in front of them, said, man, what we don't need to do that. Why are you doing that? Right? Boom, cigarettes were gone. And my theory is the same with any other kid. You give them a positive role model and you introduce firearms to them in a healthy manner. And now you're going to have a future gun enthusiast that could be an armorer, right? One of the Zeke Stout is given a scholarship to one of these kids to teach them how to be a gunsmith, which I think is a lost art in itself. You know, so we're getting some support from the gun industry. But overall, when I presented Kids to Kings and I was talking about it, the Stop the Stigma conference last week, the reception for that, and keep in mind, like, not all those people are gun people, right? A lot of those people work on the mental health side. They all agreed. Like, they thought that was really cool. So I think we're on to something, you know, and the next step is actually getting to other cities and really kind of hammering out a one-day curriculum where, you know, Atlanta was a pilot program and we were just continually going there.
That's fantastic. I want to talk about this event last week because, you know, obviously when we're talking about, and this, you know, this was an event about stigma. Was this an event about the stigma of mental health? Was this an event about the stigma of gun ownership? Both? What stigma were you talking about?
So the overall conference was about the stigmas, like stopping stigma. So to be a speaker at this event, and keep in mind, Mental Health America contacted me and asked me to co-present with them. So they submitted the proposal, but you have to submit proposals on topics, and ours got accepted, right? So we were the only ones that dealt with firearms. Like, that was the only, you know, when you go to these conferences, I like to attend all the different speakers and kind of just see how this game works. But we were the only ones with firearms. The greatest thing about this is, and I told this story the other day, when we were done, right? A bunch of people surround us, Debbie and I, who's the vice president of Mental Health America, and they had more questions, or, you know, just wanted to say, hey, good job, or, you know, this is really cool to see. I didn't know this existed. But it was cool because, like, when Debbie and I were decompressing outside, because we not only was an hour and a half of you know, speaking, and I remember Debbie saying, do you think we have, you know, are we going to be able to fill this time? We totally filled the time. We probably needed 2 hours, 2.5 hours, right? So we went over. So the speakers that were coming after us, we actually had to get out of the room because people wanted to stay and talk about this, you know, the subject of firearms and things like that. But when we were kind of sitting there, and she said, I think that went amazing. And she goes, I love that everybody stayed for the whole time. I said, not only did everybody stay for the whole time, people were filing in. So, you know, I think people were coming in and sitting down and enjoying the conversation, which is unique. And I go back to, you know, sometimes we're like wounded ducks, right? Gun people, like we are. We're like, oh, nobody gives us a chance. Nobody wants to hear our voice. And this is a perfect opportunity. You know, this is an example of an opportunity that our industry, when I'm up there, I represent the firearms industry. I don't come off of any of my stances, how I feel about red flag laws, how I feel about feel good legislation. I don't do any of that. I stay exactly who I am. And I think the industry would be proud that we're able to kind of, I don't want to say infiltrate, because infiltrate sounds like we're doing something sneaky, right?
Right.
Like, no, but we're just being us and showing what we're doing and opening people's eyes to how the firearms industry can help when it comes to fighting stigma, when it comes to mental health resources, et cetera.
Yeah, you're right. Infiltration is not the right word because you have a seat at the table. You know, I mean, you're going in through the front door, which I think is great. I mean, this is outreach to a community that, again, a lot of gun owners sort of view as institutionally hostile to our rights. Why would we want to talk to these folks, right? And that maybe is the eye-opening thing from our perspective, from a Second Amendment perspective, is that, oh, some of these folks actually do want to hear us. They do want to listen to what we have to say, right? And it's not that everybody who's in that mental health space says, okay, well, listen, we got to take the guns away from, everybody who's, says that they're depressed, or everybody who sees a counselor, right? Like, that's not, that may be a straw man that the gun owners construct, right? That there are some folks in this space who do want to hear what you have to say and who are, I think, open to the perspective of, okay, we can address these things better without legislation, without those feel-good laws, right? Pitting us against one another, as opposed to finding those ways to collaborate and ways to move forward. Why are we arguing about these things that we're always going to disagree with? Why don't we find those areas of common ground?
Yeah, I just think a lot, they haven't heard about what we're up to, and they're not going to. We're not going to get that media coverage. We can. It's possible. I don't want to say it's doom and gloom. Like, we did have the full page article in the USA Today, right? Which,
right.
I thought that was groundbreaking in itself. But for the majority of people, they don't know that the firearms industry has programs like Kids Safe, right? Derek LeBlanc out of Eugene, Oregon, that's in the article that we featured, or Devin Perkins with Kids to Kings, and they don't realize Ruger is putting the free and anonymous mental health screenings in the box. So once they hear that there's some effort on our side, I think that really helps a lot of people, grasp the concept of, let's work on the things we can work on instead of fighting with, legislation, feel-good legislation. And I also think that anytime a firearm owner is in that crowd, when they feel like, oh, okay, like this person represents me, I may have been hesitant to speak up and say I'm a firearms owner as a clinician or healthcare provider. Then they're like, now I have a voice too, because we did have a couple people that stood up on it. We had a Q&A at the end. And it's like one lady in particular stood up and she was just like, I'm an NRA member. Like, she was feeling it, right? Like, she was super proud of everything. She was super proud of everything that we were up to. And I felt like she was kind of like standing up, like, see, like, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And we need to not put stigma on firearms owners, because that was my big thing. I wanted the crowd to understand that, not only do firearms owners face the stigma coming forward about their mental health, which is this is a societal thing, right? But we also are afraid to come forward to lose our guns, right? And like, be punished for doing the right thing. And there's a huge stigma on that. And I think people forget that. I think people forget that gun owners suffer both ways. It is what it is.
It's interesting. I was talking with David Yamane a couple of weeks ago about his book Gun Curious, and he's talked about that stigma that the gun owners face in academia. Although, it was a real change for him to go from the Bay Area of California to North Carolina, where all of a sudden he felt like the odd person out, like everybody around him owned guns. And so that was a different perspective. But, there's also, I think you're right in that stigma about, even when you've got like that lady who said, I'm going to remember she was feeling it. She was at church, let's talk about this. So often I think that gun owners do feel underrepresented in these areas, whether it's academia, whether it's mental health. And again, there's almost that sense of, well, if I come out as a gun owner and I start talking about these things as a perspective of a gun owning clinician or as a gun owning academic, then I'm not going to be taken as seriously by my peers, right? They're going to say, oh, well, his or her gun ownership gets in the way of being able to see things with a clear eye like me, right? Is that part of that stigma that, we're missing out on the experience and the knowledge that these people can bring to the table because they're afraid to speak up because of their status as a gun owner?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, if you... Jake Wiskerson, right, who is a gun-owning clinician who, to me, he's like a superhero, right? Like everything. I mean, just the volunteer work he does alone with Walk Talk America, I'd give him that status. But like when we first met, he he was the first person from the mental health community to ever have me on their podcast, right? I did good in the echo chamber, right? I did good with all of Gun Talk, like all the other places, all the other outlets. I always was invited on to those shows. But I remember he was the first podcast from the mental health side. And before we went live, he said, "Hey, I got to tell you something. I have my concealed carry license. I'm a gun owner, but let's not talk about that on the show." Okay. And I was, for me, I was just happy to be there and I was just happy to be on the show. Now, Jake talks about, I had to come out of the closet as a gun owning clinician, right? And he did get the sideways looks when he did lean into this thing. But he said, if I don't ever lean into this thing, nothing's ever going to change. So there's a real life example of a board member who felt that pressure to not say, like, I own a gun and guns are normal, right? Because he didn't want to be judged. And he chaired his licensing board of the state of Nevada for mental health. So he was not just like a small clinician. He was a major figure in the state of Nevada. So it's definitely real. And people succumb to peer pressure or they don't want to hear it. So they just say, okay, maybe it's better I don't say anything. But that's we got to change that, right? And that's what I love about kind of what we're doing is it's okay to come forward and say you're a gun owner. There's nothing abnormal about this. There's a lot of guns out there. If you just think about, I know you published the article for me and I appreciate you for that. Like to always give me a home for that stuff. But in the article, it was a study for 3,000 participants, right? And I think it was something like 89% said educating children about firearm safety is so crucial, right? They believed it was important and it makes a difference. And then I think it was like 36% were only gun owners, right? So that figure just shows how important it is that we don't keep our mouths shut and we come forward and we stand on our belief system and say, like, no, we got to start educating the youth and we got to get back to that. And I don't know, maybe because I don't know what your opinion is on this, but maybe because everyone thinks the NRA is the only one that has a program, I feel like because the NRA is kind of has a PR issue amongst everybody outside of the gun industry, right? They always think like youth safety is an NRA program. I don't know if you feel that way, but I always feel like everyone's like, yeah, the NRA is the only one with a youth safety program. It's just not true. I mean, there's plenty of people, but we just need to find somebody to like step forward and carry that torch to say like these programs are out there for kids, and it doesn't have to be an NRA thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people think, oh, Eddie Eagle, right? That's the first one that comes to mind, and then they just kind of stop after Eddie Eagle. And I think that you're right about that. Yeah. Right. Eddie Eagle, look, I mean, that's a valuable program, but we're talking about really young kids, right? I mean, the message is stop, don't touch, run away, tell a grown up, right? That's what happens if you see a gun. And that is, look, it's important information for little kids. But at some point, you're going to age out of that being an effective message, right? Because when you do start getting into the age of using social media, all of a sudden now you're going to be exposed to this much bigger environment. And so you're right. I think that, certainly outside of the industry, people think, oh, NRA and Eddie Eagle, and then they don't, and all the baggage that comes with the NRA. Right. But I think what's interesting about what you're talking about with Walk the Talk America and some of these other programs that are out there is that, this shouldn't be an NRA effort any more than it should be a GOA effort, any more than it should be a WTTA effort, right? This should be an industry-wide effort because this is something that I think as a firearms industry and even as a Second Amendment effort, because it is about educating that next generation, right? And selfishly, if we don't educate that next generation, maybe they don't see that right as important and maybe that right goes away. But also by educating that next generation, we are hoping to save lives. We are dispelling the misinformation that these kids are getting on social media. We're giving them a little bit different perspective, right? With that mentorship program of, telling kids about the consequences of misusing a firearm. In some cases, a very firsthand story about the dangers of doing that. So I think that you're right that there is a lot more that can be done. And maybe, I am a
eternal optimist, so I'm always looking for the silver lining. And maybe the silver lining in the Surgeon General's proclamation last week is that it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, we see suicide as a problem too. We see violent crime as a problem too. We see juvenile crime as a problem too. And here's what we're doing, right? Without the feel good laws, without the government grants, here's what we're doing to keep people safe, to make sure that people are healthy, and to make sure that this right to keep and bear arms remains strong.
It's absolutely that. I say lean into it, right? Every time that I see statistics come out from like Gun Violence Archive, I already have a, it's not a spin, right? But it's like, I know exactly like, okay, I'm going to use your numbers against you to make you understand why my programs are super important. So it's like an opportunity exists every time they come out and put out numbers like that. Cause I'm like, the numbers don't lie. It's just how they manipulate the numbers, right? Like, so for example, when someone says, well, firearms are now the number one killer in the youth, right? Like I can deconstruct that number because I go, okay, you go from 1 to 19 or 1 to 17. I've seen it all across the board. But when you sit there and say pediatrics, right? No one's thinking of a 19-year-old kid from Chicago. They're just not. Like that's not, but we all know that they're doing a disservice to those kids because if you really care about those kids, if you really, really, truly care, you're going to separate that number and say, how do we address this pocket of gun violence? Because it's not the same as a negligent discharge. It's not the same as suicide, right? In the youth,
right?
It has a totally different approach. So I look at those numbers and say, okay, you want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. Like, let's break that number down. I've broken that number down because people have asked me. I was talking to somebody from Moms Demand Action at the conference that I was at. And she said, how do I feel about that number? And I told her exactly how I feel about that number and why. And you know what? She said, yeah, I get it. Right? She said, I get it. So she didn't say you're wrong. You know, you're not thinking about this clearly. Oh, that's just not true, because she knows it's true. She knows what they did to those numbers. And like I said, when you do that, it's really not fair to those kids that you say you care about, because either you don't care or you have a huge, huge blind spot and you're not realizing that you're only going to continue with the gun violence deaths that happen if you don't start having programs like Kids to King starting early. Just because you teach kids about firearm safety does not mean they're going to grow up to do something silly with a gun. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. When you look at Kids Safe, Derek LeBlanc has had 29,000 kids come through his program, right? This is out of Eugene, Oregon. 29,000. He has not had one negative incident with a firearm. As a matter of fact, and the stories become anecdotal, I get it, but he has more examples of kids finding a gun and knowing exactly what to do the right thing than any negligent discharge like I had when I was a kid, accidental death, anything like that. So, you know, the answer is there. We just got to push these programs, and you know, Derek and Devin and guys like that that really want to do it need to be funded, and they need help. And unfortunately, it's only going to come from the firearms industry as of right now. I just know it for a fact. You know, every grant I try to go after, I don't get it, and I get it. It goes somewhere up the chain, and then somebody says, well, in the end, this guy's from the firearms industry. Do we really want to be giving money to those people? And you should want to, but hey, we'll get there.
Yeah.
I'm the ultimate optimist too, Cam. Like, trust me. Like I look at all this stuff and I see opportunity, and I'm just like, okay, why can't we just like rise up and be better? You know what I mean? Like, right. Our stuff makes sense. I'm not talking to the anti-gun people. When I'm talking to that crowd in Utah, I'm talking to my people, and I'm talking to the people that are gun neutral. That's all I care about. Yeah. You know, the ones with the agenda are going to stay on course with their agenda. It's all the other people that go, I didn't even know this existed. This is amazing.
Absolutely. So, all right, listen, speaking of funding, I have the free Zoom. So my 40-minute time limit is about to run out on our interview here. If somebody would like to pay for a Zoom membership for me, that'd be great. But I would say, rather than do that, check out Walk the Talk America. WTTA.org is the website. They're doing amazing things. And Mike, again, thanks so much for coming on the program, man. It's been too long. I'm really glad we had a chance to catch up and And you've got a microphone and you've got a platform whenever you want it. So I hope that we get to see more of your stuff at Bearing Arms too.
Appreciate that, Cam. Thank you for everything you do.
My thanks to Mike for joining us on the program today. We'll be talking with him again in the near future. All right, before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, let's talk about this for a second. At the very heart of our democracy lies the principle that we hold sacred, free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech, committed to giving a voice to the silenced. Now, Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts, the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. That's why Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it absolutely free. Just text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, then act now. Text the word IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. All right, turning now to today's recidivist report. We've got a case out of North Carolina. Teen charged in wreck that left a Forsyth County deputy injured was on probation for taking a gun to a college campus. That's right. Yeah, we're told this is, a very serious thing, right? College campuses in North Carolina, they are sensitive places. You are not allowed to bring a firearm on campus, even if you have a concealed carry license. So what happens when you violate that law? Well, Christopher Anthony Allen found out, according to the Winston-Salem Journal, back on May 15th, Allen pleaded guilty under a plea deal with the Forsyth County DA's office to possession of a gun on educational property, resisting an officer, and carrying a concealed weapon. He also pleaded guilty to possession of marijuana, attempted trafficking in opium, and carrying a concealed firearm. Judge Jason Ramey of Forsyth County Superior Court gave Allen, who according to local authorities is a confirmed gang member, a suspended sentence of 1 year and 10 months to 3 years and 10 months, and then placed Allen on probation for 3 years. Ramey also ordered Allen to serve 4 months in jail. Allen was released from custody on June 21st. So the 4-month jail sentence was about 5 weeks long. How about that? Meanwhile, Allen is now charged with 11 counts of discharging a weapon into occupied property, according to arrest warrants. He's accused of firing a handgun multiple times into an occupied home, which then led to a chase with Winston-Salem police that ended on I-40 when a deputy was struck by the fleeing car, who ended up suffering some pretty severe injuries, broke his elbow and his pelvis. The vehicle's driver is a juvenile who's been charged with felony assault with a deadly weapon on a government official, felony hit and run, as well as other offenses. 2 other individuals also charged. Allen is now back behind bars with no bond allowed, according to the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. But again, he would not have been out and able to allegedly participate in this drive-by shooting had the judge in this case sentenced Mr. Allen to prison rather than putting him on probation. And since a confirmed gang member bringing a gun onto a college campus results in probation, how about lawmakers in North Carolina get rid of the prohibition on lawful concealed carry on college campuses and allow lawful gun owners to protect themselves from people like Mr. Allen, who are violating the law without consequence? Listen, we're not going to get it from North Carolina. North Carolina's Republican supermajority won't even pass constitutional carry, much less campus carry. But they need to when you got stuff like this going on. All right, today's Armed Citizen story from Chicago, where a 17-year-old stabbed a concealed carry holder and then was shot by the woman in question during an argument near the 31st Street Beach. That's been a site of a string of violent incidents there in Chicago. This was Saturday night around 11:30. Police say the 17-year-old got into an argument with the, I believe, 26-year-old concealed carry holder, pulled out a sharp object, then stabbed the woman in the arm. That's when the concealed carry holder drew her own firearm, fired a shot at the teen, striking her in the shoulder. According to authorities, both women taken to local hospitals in good condition, but the teenager is the one facing charges. The concealed carry holder acted in self-defense and not charged by Chicago police at the moment. Finally, today, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, a Good Samaritan in Miami, Florida, who came to the aid of a church that had been targeted by thieves. 3 air conditioning units stolen by thieves in Miami. And after Channel 7 in Miami covered this story, I mean, again, who steals? And these weren't little like window units. These were the big honking units here. 3 of them stolen. After WSVN Channel 7 in Miami reported on this theft, they say a 7 News viewer chipped in to help the Gospel Arena International Ministry on Thursday afternoon. Pastor Junior Thompson said, because of the news, somebody called me today and said, I just want to sponsor both units. The Good Samaritan actually donated 3 new air conditioning units, which is amazing. Pastor Thompson says, I thank God for all the donations that came in from people I don't even know. We said, I mean, these people I never came in contact with, but thanks be to God that our blessings come back to us because we love our community and we're here for our community. Alex Alexander is a minister there at the church. He said it was so hot on Sunday, it's practically unbearable. He said the pastor preached for like 45 minutes with a suit on, said it was really piping in the church, but he said the congregation pushed through. He said, God brought us still. Pastor Emmanuel Bryant said everyone was sweating and fanning. But now, next Sunday, hopefully, will be a lot cooler. Estimates for the repairs originally estimated about $20,000. But again, this anonymous Good Samaritan does not want to be identified. Kicking in to make sure that the flock is cool and comfortable when they go to church next Sunday. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Whoever that anonymous Good Samaritan is, we thank you for your very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. On tomorrow's program, we're probably going to be talking about the wrap-up conference from the Supreme Court. We do expect to get those final orders at some point today. In fact, by the time you see this, we may have already received those orders. We'll also be talking with a armed citizen in Virginia who helped save the lives of 2 kids just a few days ago. That's coming up again on tomorrow's Bearing Arms Cam & Company, so be sure to tune in for that. And check out BearingArms.com throughout the day. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Litigation, legislation. We've got new laws taking effect, good and bad, in Virginia, or excuse me, not in Virginia, in, the bad in places like Colorado and California. There are some good ones as well. West Virginia, campus carry taking effect. We've got you covered again on all those stories at BearingArms.com. Have a great rest of your Monday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.